In 2019, there was nearly 2.5 times as many suicides in the United States as there were homicides. That is 47,511 suicides in the United States. Wow, that is dark. Why did I decide to start the video like that? Okay, cue in the intro. Are you gonna let me sit? Hi, good morning. How are you? So good to What is up, everybody? It's your boy Umar Farooq, and hey, listen, as dark as those stats were in the beginning of this video, they're still very much a reality here in this country. In that same year, suicide was the second leading cause of death for individuals ages 10 through 34, according to the CDC. And according to the World Health Organization, more than 264 million people suffer from depression worldwide. And if you take a closer look between two different age groups, 12 through 17 versus 18 through 25, adolescents between 12 through 17 years of age experience the highest rate of major depressive episodes. So what am I doing? What is the purpose of all this information that I'm just throwing at you and seemingly making the world a darker place? Well, as an aspiring social worker, I'm looking to carry out an intervention that will help destigmatize topics around mental health, as well as increase awareness for those struggling with mental illness and or addiction. You see, I decided to sit down with Iowa State Representative Ras Smith, running for governor for the 2022 elections. I felt if I'm looking to make an impact on a macro scale, why not take this conversation up to someone who can actually make a difference on a political level? Now, I wasn't gonna jump the gun and talk to him right away. You see, I'm not from here. I am from New Jersey. I had just moved here for grad school a couple months ago, and I did not feel like I had the right to come up with this intervention and go into this interview with my own ideas of what we can do. I am not from Iowa. I have never experienced Iowan culture, so I felt I needed to get a feel of what the state of mental health is like here in the state of Iowa. And what did I think was the best way of doing this? Hip-hop.
I got sunshine, I'm about to make it. Sitting on cloud 9, I'm about to let it rain. I got sunshine, I'm about to let it. Sitting on cloud 9, I'm about to make it.
Professor Shuaib Meacham from the University of Northern Iowa. I'm a literacy education professor and been in Iowa for about 8 years, originally from Canton, Ohio. During the 8 years I've been here, we started a program called HipHop Literacy, which is really trying to take the enthusiasm that students have for hip-hop, really looking at the reading and writing practices, because that's what schools are interested in, and we want to improve their school performance. But the more we engage with the students, and especially after they produced a CD project, then that that interest expanded into making sure as many people heard that CD as possible. And one of the phenomenal outcomes of the project, especially when we were out on the East Coast, was that 100% of the kids went on to college. And so we're trying to replicate that kind of impact here in the Cedar Valley of Iowa.
So this wonderful program connects young adolescents to resources that allows them to express themselves in a way that traditional academic environments doesn't truly allow them to. Why the choice of music production? Well, I'm biased. I'm an artist, I'm a producer, and hip-hop has always been a therapeutic outlet for me before I even began therapy for myself.
Without really recognize it, we found that hip-hop literacy really has a therapeutic process. Everything begins with the beat, the background track. So once they have the background track, it's something that they can really lose themselves in, because it's really kind of a hybrid of music and literacy. And so they kind of get caught up into the beat, and if you give them a theme to write to that's related to issues of importance to them, then that composition process has that therapeutic impact, because they're constantly reflecting on what they're saying, getting lost in that beat with the words, with the rhymes. And after it's done, they have something that they produced that they can share with other people, they can talk about, they can reflect on, and it really creates a kind of therapeutic impact.
So I decided this would be the perfect opportunity to bring in the intersection of artistry and music production and the topic of mental health. So I sat down with a bunch of the kids from HipHop Literacy, and I provided them 2 different beats that I produced. So one of them was a little bit more hype, and the other one was a little bit darker. So I asked them to choose whatever beat they want and write about something that they cared about. I'm I'm a firm believer that mental health is directly connected to your value system. And so the point of them writing about what they cared about was to use that as a segue into diving into their state of mental health.
And when you're responding to trauma, you have to have a similarly open mindset. You can't say, okay, an effective response to trauma is going to look like X, because that might not be what a particular individual would respond to. So if you're open to whatever that human being might respond to, we're talking about walks in nature or arts or writing, drawing, painting, whatever it is, we have to be open to any number of many different types of responses. And I think when we normalize that, I think we can have a bigger impact. And I think that would revolutionize the quality, the outcomes that we're looking for when it comes to mental health.
Say you're better than me, let me prove that you're wrong. Started so small, now I'm big, you can call me calm. This week I started wrestling, knocking people down, and you see me, it's impressive.
The younger kids chose to write about their passion behind sports and just living a good life, as innocent as it could have gotten. And it makes sense, whatever makes these kids feel alive is what allows them to make sure that they're checking in with themselves and getting up in the morning. The older kids decided to go with a darker beat, and they decided to write about the police brutality that's been taking place here in Waterloo, Iowa.
First off, young about that cheddar outside doing better to my bro. Police out to get up, hit they hard like sweaters, made them fall, then picked them up and felt good like failure. Why all of a sudden all y'all moves is switching like the weather?
Police trying to chase me off my bike like I'm Debo. When I get older, trying to chase us like a me bro. Police trying to shoot me in my back like a free throw.
These young men have seen a lot for their age when it comes to police brutality, and it's definitely created a sense of trauma that shouldn't exist for kids that age. That is their reality, and that is what they're dealing with, which is more of a reason why mental health initiatives, I feel, are so much more important for our youth in not only healing adverse childhood experiences but also preventing them. I don't think it's fair for an individual to live with a cumulative trauma that occurs constantly every single day and not have access to mental health services and not be allowed to talk about how they really feel. Going into this meeting with these group of kids, I was looking to actually have a semi-lecture engagement type of thing going on where I would just kind of give them the basic understanding of depression, anxiety, ADHD, blah, 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 and then provide them with resources and use hip hop to segue. But this turned out to be a lot more intimate and therapeutic than I thought it was gonna be, and I think for the better. I really got to sit down and understand what it feels like to want to talk about all the things that you're scared of, all the things that you hide, but being too afraid to open up to someone in fear of being judged or being considered weak. So this conversation with the hip-hop literacy kids helped inform me of where these kids were coming from when it comes to mental health as I was going into my interview with Ras Smith. So I sat down with Ras and asked him, hey, what can you do as governor for these kids who don't know what to do when it comes to opening up about their mental health? We talked about what can be done to help destigmatize topics around mental health, as well as make mental health services more accessible.
That is the question that's going to challenge most of our systems over time. For me, if we don't think that way, right, then we're not root causing.
For sure.
And oftentimes, we can't afford Band-Aids anymore. I mean, we have to be real about what our challenges are. We can't afford Band-Aids. We have to do the tough work of asking why like 3 times, right, to really figure out what's happening. And so for me, the macro is so impactful because right now we have mass trauma. We have mass exposure to so many things, whether it be gun violence, right, drug epidemics, anything, you know, outside of COVID, even. We have mass undereducating of populations, right? And so how do you address those things on a large scale? One, that it's more cost effective to do so, but prevention is always the main determiner of success. How can we build in some of these policies and principles early on? And so preventative measures is key. That's key.
Ras had also touched on the value system. Everyone has, or at least should have, the value of well-being. Why can't brain health be part of that?
It's broad spectrum, so we're casting a broader net. If I'm really individualized, I'll miss somebody. Every clinical approach doesn't work. There are places here in Waterloo, just off of Broadway, where kids can go and walk and talk and literally stand beside a horse, right? Because horses will match your heartbeat.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
that's wild.
It's wild, right? But like, there's different things that they can do because that works for some students.
Right.
They can go in there and talk to their counselor and have pets around. Some people it's plants.
For sure.
Whatever you do though, we have to give people the opportunity to have variety.
Yeah.
If we're overly prescriptive, we'll miss so many people. Because what if that doesn't work for me?
Right.
And I think on the macro level, by doing so from a policy perspective, we open up opportunities for more people who have a different, diverse thought process.
Sure.
Hip-hop literacy is a perfect example, right? Whoever would have thought that literally writing lyrics and raps and creating and producing music would be a caveat or an avenue for people to talk about brain health and mental health.
Well, you know, even as an artist myself, like we see it all the time. A lot of rappers, all they do, a lot of artists in general talk about like, this is therapy to me. This is therapy to me. And it's time we quantify it into data.
Exactly, exactly.
So one of the young men in the hip hop literacy program and I sat down and we talked about the importance of having these conversations around mental health with those that we trust. He had mentioned to me that hip hop is a perfect outlet because he gets to pick and choose what he wants to talk about. So that begged the question, why do you have to pick and choose about sharing what is going on inside, especially as it relates to your brain health? He had replied to me that if he shares the wrong thing or if he overshares, he might be, once again, be judged for what he's talking about, considered weak, maybe even made fun of. And so I asked him, what if you can share or overshare, whatever that means, what is going on inside and not be judged for it, not be considered weak, and still feel accepted in that environment? He told me, well, I wouldn't want nobody to kiss up to me. I'd want some constructive criticism. And I asked, why can't you have both? What is so impossible about sharing about what's going on inside, but also be given constructive feedback on healthy ways to cope with what's going on inside? He looked me dead in the eyes and said, I don't know, I guess I never thought about it that way. I basically looked to him and told him that's what therapy, at least in my experience, is supposed to be. I had brought this conversation up to Ras and asked him what were his thoughts on it. It's like these kids, and just much like me growing up, we didn't know that was possible, right? And over here in Waterloo, where ACEs is such a perpetuating occurrence, how many people grow up and end up going to the grave not knowing that it's possible, right?
Yeah, most people, right?
Most people, right?
Most people.
So what is your response to these kids? How can you, as future governor, give a voice to these kids who don't know the value, who don't yet know the value of gaining access to these mental health services, whether you're removing barriers, whether you're having more representation of people's values and their access to mental health services? What is your direct response to that statement of, I don't know?
You know, a lot of that's interesting. When I was in the school, and I have to use this example, this is like the closest bridge for me. When I talk about behavior management in our school districts, oftentimes I had to remind our educators and administrators that a student demonstrating antisocial behavior in a school sometimes means that's the only safe place for them to express how they feel about something. At home, to display that behavior might mean abuse. Right? It might mean you get hit, you get told to leave. Right?
That's exactly what makes him say that I will get judged for oversharing.
For oversharing, right? So if in our classroom, that's a safe space, I get to be myself, and sometimes that's not my best self, right? But it's my real self in that moment. Right? We have to have eyes to see that. That's a gain sometimes. That's a relationship. That's showing that you feel safe enough around me to display a behavior that may be how you're truly authentically feeling, even though it may not be socially acceptable in this moment or whatever we want to phrase it as. It's still you being your true self. And so when it comes to students utilizing that safe space to write down on paper or put over a track how they feel about a circumstance, we're providing a safe space for them, that comfortability, right? And that's important because that's not for everybody, right? That's not for everything. My wife, that might be a canvas with paint. That might be her safe space to express something, and then tell you how she feels about it or why it looks like the way it looks. But we can't take away those avenues. And so I would say, when you talk about counselors, sometimes it's hard, man, because I think a counselor without a shared lived experience to you makes you feel as though it's just somebody asking you questions. And that's hard because you got to get past that part of it. For these young people, we're talking about them trusting in an institution that's unfamiliar. Trusting in something that that's faith. We're asking them to do something that's different because most things in this society have not told them that they're valuable.
Especially when that institution is the ones that betrayed them from the very beginning.
Over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And so it's about, you have to be more than just a counselor. Counselors, like you said, have to be reflective. Maybe you got to be somebody who I'm familiar with. Maybe you need to go to, maybe our students should go more so to Bakari, which they do, right? They go to Bakari services where they see familiar faces asking questions about shared lived experiences. Because sometimes you just want to know that, dang, that was bogus, right? Like that was not normal, right? Like, no, it's not normal. It's not normal. It's not okay. And so it's okay for you to feel some type of way about it.
Right.
Sometimes that's all people are asking is to be affirmed and that their experience was as wild as they thought.
Exposure to validation and other people telling the same story.
Telling the same story.
Yeah.
And a counselor that's lived that is never going to minimize, right? Or never going to glorify, right? And those are things that you always have to be mindful of because you can't minimize the experience. You don't want to seem like you're giddy glorifying the experience. Like you just want to be told a good story as a counselor, like so many people sometimes do. And so those are things that we have to be mindful of because that's radical. Being radically inclusive means we're being mindful of those things.
Absolutely.
And developing a team that every time, right, this is for you, right? This is a perfect client for you to chat with because you know this. Have that conversation about your experiences. Relationships matter more so than anything else. Before I care about what you have to say, I have to care about who you are.
Absolutely. Wow. So you believe that preventative measures in the public school systems are the first step to answering the question of like, how do we get young kids just to start thinking about mental health services?
100%.
Wow.
100%. Early intervention in our school setting, I think, is the only way that we can address the mass trauma that we've seen taking place in our communities, in our state, in our country. Early intervention matters.
Yeah.
And so I don't know any other entity, right, besides our failing childcare system nationally, in which we see the volume of individuals to make the impact I think is necessary for a healthy, thriving community going forward.
So walking away from this conversation with Ras, do we have all the answers? Have we figured out how to cure mental health and mental illnesses on a macro scale? Of course we haven't. I think that this interview with Ras, it only showed that there's so much more work to do, and it can only be done if we help to not only get together, but work with those who have our best interests in mind. If conversations around mental health is something we want to continue to destigmatize, we need to normalize the denormalization of adverse childhood experiences or trauma. And the way we do that is by talking about it, getting together, letting the people who represent us know that my mental health comes first. I would love to see a future in which those numbers I spit out in the beginning of this video would dramatically decrease, just like we saw a dramatic increase during the pandemic. But that can't be done until people like you and I can go out and talk about this. Okay, and I might be a little biased. I'm aspiring to become a therapist. In order to get to a place where those numbers decrease, it starts with you. It starts with you advocating for yourself and your mental health. But anyways, these are just the opinions of a random brown guy who just so happens to live in Iowa now. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I'm kind of digging the idea of bringing a spotlight to a lot of social issues I care about. If you would like to see more content like this, please comment down below and let me know. Like the video, or even just dislike the video if you don't like it. I mean, hey, I appreciate you for watching. If you would like to check out the full interview with Ras Smith, that'll be linked below in the description. All of the resources regarding the mental health numbers I had mentioned in the beginning of this video are also listed below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. Don't forget to wash your hands, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.
One day, promise I'ma be there. One day, I'll be happy just to breathe air. One day, I'ma be there for myself. But for now, I need peace on my mind. Please hold my
legs are asleep. What the hell?